honestly expect the court to help you maintain the law? Why should they? There aren't any courts at law. You heard me right. There isn't any court of law left in the United States. Why? Because the United States is in bankruptcy and receivership. It's under martial law and vice admiralty, and thus every court in the United States is an administrative tribunal under admiralty, martial law, commerce, bankruptcy, and receivership. Like a friend of mine says, John, well, I went to court with him one time, and his little girl went with us. And he says, John, he says, this is going to be kind of tough for me, okay? Understand you want to take care of my daughter while I'm doing the thing? And I said, yes, of course. And she's sitting there, and she turns around, and she looks at me, she says, Mr. Quade, isn't that flag pretty? Look at that gold fringe around it. And I said, I beg your pardon, darling? And she says, Mr. Quade, look at that flag up there by the judge's bench. Look how pretty it is. It has all that gold fringe around it and everything. Isn't that pretty? How do you tell a child that that's a battle flag? Because the courts are invading, and the instrument of tyranny of a Congress that sits unlawfully, of a president who styles himself as a king. I mean, how do you tell anybody that? How do you explain to it? Her dad just goes in there and gets ripped off for $147 on a traffic citation that he doesn't owe. You see? And the conservative movement in America, just to show you how intellectually bankrupt the whole conservative movement is, and stop and think now, you got all the Christians that are waiting for the Lord to come back next Wednesday at 12:22, and you got all the conservatives that don't understand the difference between revolution, you see, and Christian warfare, because they've forgotten the theology of John Knox. And the conservatives are all running around saying, we're going to recapture the country. We're going to bring everything back together. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we got to elect Ronald Reagan, and we got to keep George Bush in office, and we can't let them nasty liberals get in office or anything else. And the bottom line is they're all intellectually bankrupt. They only pay lip service. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And we don't have guts enough to collectively indict every single one of them for treason. The only guy I know who ever did that has been a hunted man for the last 5 years. But the rest of the American people don't care enough. You see? We're all crying about law enforcement and the police and everything else and what kind of a job they're supposed to be doing. When in God's name is a police officer, why is he someone else's guardian, keeper on the highways? What is a police officer doing on the highways? I had the sheriff in Rosamond, California, 7 months ago, made a confession in my front yard because I confronted him with the fact that the sheriff at one time was a common law office. And now it has been compromised. And he said, I know that, John. And I said, then what does that make you? And he kind of looked a little embarrassed, looked down at things a little bit. He said, I'm a revenue officer for the bureaucrats. You deserve the drug dealers in your neighborhood, people, because your cops are out playing revenue officers for bureaucrats. You deserve to have your daughters raped and your sons violated by homosexuals. You deserve to have your wife attacked on some street corner and have her property seized and be beaten to a pulp. You yourself, as the head of household, deserve to be strung up and have unseemly things done to your person in the private parts. We are all guilty of having redefined what a law enforcement officer is, and thus we don't have anyone to blame but ourselves. And the conservatives, with their intellectual stupidity, who are always concerned about seizing the moment, seizing the agenda and everything else, have, since 1868, utterly botched the job of even understanding where history's going. I think some of the guys have probably already talked about what happened with the 14th Amendment. I'm going to rehash it just a minute before I close. The 14th Amendment of these United States was passed in 1868. It was the first Civil Rights Act. Now, of course, in order to get it onto the floor of the Senate, they had to unconstitutionally unseat several senators. And all this is a matter of public record. It's not my opinion. You can read the congressional record where it's all been rehashed. You can read court decisions where it's been rehashed and everything else. They go through it. Everybody knows that the 14th Amendment was unconstitutionally passed, and that all the southern states were held under gunpoint to guarantee their signatures, the signature of their legislators. You see, the entire 14th Amendment was a fraud perpetrated at gunpoint on the American people. Now, the historians and the boys out there in Hollywood, and the girls, I guess, too, and various other individuals in the media will all tell us that the 14th Amendment gave citizenship to black people, and the American dream is now possible for them. Biggest damn lie that ever came down the pike. Because what the 14th Amendment did, it gave citizenship not as a right, but as a privilege to non-whites. Read Title 42, Section 1981 sometime. Go to your local library and pull it down and read it. You'll get the whole story in there. And all these liberals, neo-Marxists, left-wing, and pseudo-compassionate conservatives who are so concerned about the rights of minorities in this country are liars. They are vipers. They are thieves, robbers, and rapists of the worst sort. Because what the Congress could have done in 1868 was very simply said, the rights, privileges, and immunities of the common law shall not be denied to any person on account of race. But then if they had done that, they would have given black people and every other minority in this country citizenship as a right of birth and not a privilege. Now, why is it important? Because in American law, only privileges can be taxed. Rights cannot be taxed. Only privileges, benefits, or opportunities can be taxed. Hundreds of court cases to substantiate that. The only trick for the Congress was, okay, let's see, we got all the Negroids, we've got all the Orientals, and some of these South Sea Island tribes. We got the Indians taken care of. How do we get them whites out there, man? That's the next thing we got to do. Get the whites. Get the whites to do what? To voluntarily give up their rights, that's what. Because they can't take them away from you. Piece of cake. Piece of cake. Problem's all taken care of. Let's see. The United States government owes it, and every American is entitled to Social Security. Everyone is entitled to Social Security. And it isn't going to cost you that much. 1%, 1.5% maybe, 2%. It wasn't the fact that it only costs you 1.5% or 2%, and the fact that you deserve or don't deserve